Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. And of course, we can't do it without the founder of the Four Horsemen, the creator of the Spine Buster. He's the Hall of Famer. He's double A. He's the enforcer. He's Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Fantastic. We just went through summer of '86. That was a huge summer for the industry, wouldn't you say?
I totally agree. It was a huge time for Jim Crockett Promotions. I think you could argue that 1986 is their biggest and best year. And now with the summer behind us, that means one thing. It's time to march towards Starrcade. But before we do, I wanted to play a little clip from August 30th. I know it's September, but on August 30th, we had a couple of different promos. One in particular I wanted to highlight about Dick Murdoch. This airs on August 30th.
We are back here now at ringside. Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch with us.
You know, Tony, that was complete devastation. You know, but I saw Ric Flair out here earlier along with Baby Doll. And, you know, I seen him stand out here. You know, if you took Baby Doll and you put her out on my farm, out on my ranch here in Canyon, Texas, and put them around there with our horses, our quarter horse, you had her head down grazing, and you looked out there to see which one of the mares you wanted to pull up, and just looking out from the backside, you couldn't tell which one was a mare and which one was Baby Doll. Now, you know, she's got on the wrong side of the fence.
Uh-oh. Here's Ric Flair, the world champion. Here are the Four Horsemen. And James J. Dillon.
Let me just say something to you in all fair warning. A lot of guys have walked out here and made the mistake of jacking around with the Four Horsemen. And you know what happens to them? They get hurt real bad. Let me tell each one of you clowns one thing. One-on-one, I'll take on any of you, but there's four of you. I want you to stack on one-on-one. Come on, let's go. Come on.
Okay, there he goes to the ring. Look what they have waiting for him.
So in the ring, it's Magnum, Ron Garvin, and Dusty, and it's a Pier 6 brawl.
Dick Murdoch and all eight are in the ring right now. JJ and Baby Doll not going anywhere. No, they are not. Well, we're at the end of our program. We have to go. No, we gotta go. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, put in the ring. Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, Ron Garvin, Dick Murdoch. Holy Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Ric Flair. They're battling it out. See you next week, fans. Look at them go. Rights and lefts everywhere.
Man, how fun was David Crockett? Was he having fun or what?
Yeah, I've learned since we've been going back through this, and I've been getting a chance to actually listen and hear about the content and the excitement in his voice. David sells chaos better than anybody, I think.
Oh my gosh, he's tremendous at it. You know, we listened to some of those clips earlier in the year, like when you guys were attacking Sam Houston in the parking lot and whatnot. And I think both you and I were like, damn, he did such a great job there. But this Pier 6 brawl, and it's interesting because the Horsemen, listen, as a kid, everybody loved to boo them. We're cheering the good guys. And, that would continue on. We wanted the Lex Lugers and the Stings and the Steiner brothers and what have you. But then you pay a little more attention and you start to realize, hey, man, it really is the bad guys who are helping tell this story. And what's fascinating us is not necessarily the neon colors and the big muscles and the crazy hairdos. It's the story. And the story a lot of times is led by, we've got to right this wrong. We've got to overcome this evil. And more often than not, that was indeed the Four Horsemen. But now it's become sort of plug and play with the Horsemen firmly positioned at this point as the number one heels in the whole game, and the guys who by and large carry all the gold. We could pretty much slide anybody in there. And I wanted to play that clip because we're used to Dusty, right? And we're used to Magnum. Those are the two top guys on the babyface side of things. But in 1986, we slid Ron Garvin in there and started to show that he could knock out Rick anytime he wanted. And that really is all it took. And Ron Garvin was a made man. But now we're even trying the association with Dick Murdoch, who obviously is a longtime friend of Dusty Rhodes. But the Horsemen created so many opportunities to help make guys, a new guy into the promotion, a guy who's looking for one last run, a guy who's trying to make a name for himself. No matter where you are on the card, if they're standing across from the Horsemen, there's an opportunity for them to be leveled up in the fans' eyes. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. 100%. And we knew our job. And the fact is, is if you're a champion and you hold a championship and you get enough TV time to go in there and kick somebody's ass that you should, that's enhancement talent. And then you get the interview time to talk about what you just did. If you have ability and talent and you're smart enough to know what you're doing, which we all did, you can make a whole lot of people because you got those things in place, being a champion, having interview time, winning every week on TV. All those things play into now being able to take that and transfer it to whoever you want to make. And that's what the situation was with Murdoch would have been.
It's super fun to look back and realize, hey, that's exactly what they were doing. And you guys hit the ground running when it comes time for September. You're in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You're going to pick up a win over Todd Champion. Then they're going to do the Battle of the Belts that same day down in Florida. I'm only mentioning it because, Ric Flair was a mainstay in a lot of those shows. A television taping is in order on the 2nd. You would have some action here as well. This time it's in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We've talked a lot about the Spartanburg TVs. Where does that rank for you as far as Spartanburg, as far as a town for Jim Crockett Promotions? Is it an A town? Is it a B town?
It's an A town in the fact that the fans, were jammed in there. I don't know how many seats it held, but maybe 5,000, something along. It was a huge building, but it was enough that if you pack people in there, it really had acoustically, it had a great vibe. Plus it was only, 50, 60, maybe 80 miles from Charlotte, which was nice to shoot down there and shoot back. It was a hot arena though. I will say that. That's something you remember. The air conditioning was not up to snuff. If they even had air conditioning, I'm not sure, but I just remember sweating my ass off in that building.
Yeah, I feel like you mentioned that anytime we bring up that one or Dorton Arena. I love the look of Dorton Arena, and Tony Schiavone says I'm crazy, and it was an awful building. He describes it almost like Bruce Pritchard does the old Boston Gardens. He said it would get so hot the walls would sweat, which is what a description.
Well, yeah, and with Dorton Arena, I mean, if it was summertime, and you had that sun, it would start down, right around match time. It would be beaten right in all that glass. It was glass all the way around. And it just, that sun would just beat through the windows and it just made it just stagnant. The dressing rooms were downstairs, underground. So you didn't have any air conditioning down there either. It was, it was a hot building. So was Spartanburg.
Richmond, Virginia is where you'll be in front of 4,500 fans on September 5th. It looks like it's going to be Wahoo and the Road Warriors taking on Tully, Ole, and Arn. Wahoo's going to pin Ole at the 15-minute mark. So the good guys ride again. We're in Baltimore on the 6th. It's the Rock and Rolls, of course, versus Ole and Arn. And the bout here is to determine the number one contendership. We keep the hits going. That same day, you guys are running in Baltimore. You're also running a show in Philadelphia. Boy, you guys are aimed at a global takeover. And then we're back doing TV again in Atlanta on September the 7th. This is a different era for you guys. For a while, you would record the show and it would air a week later. And then eventually it would start to be, we're going to record the show this morning and it'll be on the show tonight at 6:05. But now we're back to recording a week ahead of time. I assume this is because of sports, the college football scoreboard and what have you. And you could see some of the things. I don't know if you heard earlier, Arn, but we played a clip from last month and Jim Cornette was at the desk and he said, hey, we're here with the Andersons after your Schick match of the week. So there was a Razor sponsorship. The first time that I played that clip for Tony Schiavone, he said, did he just say the shit match of the week? No. It was a Razor sponsorship, but those opportunities existed. And even though it sounds silly, the association with a major brand like that on the super station, man, it just makes your whole thing feel bigger, more mainstream. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I wish we would have had a ton of all that stuff going on. It just, that was one, I guess they just happened on, but yeah, it made it feel better. I mean, everybody knows what a Schick razor is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a big brand. I mean, I'm not sure it's as strong as Coca-Cola or something like that, but it's not bad.
I feel strongly that saving money is important. If it's not something we worry about now, boy, we are really going to worry about it later. And I want to help you get out of debt faster and do it with cheaper monthly payments. I'm talking to you if you're in a 30-year loan. Now is the time to take years off of your loan. We're routinely helping our listeners cut 5, 10, even 15 years off their loan. And you can do this without perfect credit with no money out of pocket. You've just got to start at savewithconrad.com. No, it is not bad at all. And neither is the show that they got at a television taping at the Township Auditorium in Columbia. It would be Dusty taking on Arn Anderson. And he's going to win the title with a DDT onto a steel chair. And this is moments after the referee, Earl Hebner, was knocked to the floor. And you were attempting to use the chair as a weapon. So the TV title here, the reign comes to an end. And that actually airs on September 13th on Pro. And I think we've got a little bit of audio from it.
Remember. Rhodes out of professional wrestling. From all over this world, let us come in from people talking about when is Dusty Rhodes going to be through. Right here, I start working my way back. Probably one of the greatest matches of my life, besides winning the World Heavyweight Championship, which I will again from the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The World Heavyweight title is once again Dusty Rhodes right here, and you call it, baby, and let's take a look at it so the many fans can see what happened. All right. Arn Anderson for the last several minutes has been on that leg, and now he goes, and he's got Dusty Rhodes in such trouble. He'll not give it up. Johnny, that's the one thing he's going to try to stay with now. We know the pain that the Dream has absorbed before the match for the World Heavyweight title with Ric Flair in St. Louis. He was injured when he went into that match, absorbed tremendous pain, and now he's at it again in another world title match, this one for the World Television, and again, he's really absorbing some pain. And Arn Anderson, who right now smells victory. He's got to be feeling good that he's got Dusty Rhodes in such shape. Dusty kicks him off. Dusty continues to fight back. There's that elbow.
Do you remember this fondly? I mean, obviously you remember the big moments where you win the titles, but dropping it to Dusty's probably just as fun for you.
100%. 100%. If you're in a fight with Dusty Rhodes and it's competitive, you can get beat right in the middle and you're better than you were before that match. Just being able to compete on an even playing field with Dusty.
We're in Columbia, South Carolina here. You told us about Spartanburg. Did you prefer Columbia over Spartanburg, or was it the same old deal? Man, it was just hot.
No, it was, that's a great arena, that old Columbia building we used to go to, because it was like the upper deck was like almost over the ring. There wasn't a bad seat in the place. And just the ambiance was incredible. It had a nice old stage with a curtain, and it was awesome. It was awesome. I loved all those towns, and being close to Charlotte may not sound like much, and I harp on it quite a bit. In those days, you could see how we're traveling. To run down to Columbia 90 miles and back was beautiful any day of the week.
And now there's the big ref bump. Baby Earl takes a spill down to the floor, and you kick the knee of Dusty Rhodes and slide right out and look under that ring. And what do you know? There's a steel folding chair, and the fans are going nuts. Take a listen to this.
Dusty had to be one of your toughest, but what a great match it was. Let me tell you something, Bob Collin. Now then, let me tell you something, James J. Dillon. You go tell Tully Blanchard, personally for Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, that now then it's his turn. Wahoo McDaniel stripped him of the title. As you say before, a better man won, Tully Blanchard. A better man won. Nature Boy Ric Flair, you got one Captain Redneck, my ex-partner, still brother in life, Dick Murdoch, to deal with. And now Tully Blanchard, Ole and Arn Anderson, the four Horsemen, you got to deal with Dusty Rhodes at his baddest, at his wildest, at his meanness. And Arn Anderson, I know ain't heard the last of you, and that's good. I like it. Because the pain you tried to inflict on me again backfired on you. This title belongs to me now. The world television title, and it's going to stay with me until I'm ready to leave it.
So there you go. Dusty Rhodes is now the television champion. And man, you've had quite a run with that belt. At first, you just started to claim possession was 9/10 of the law. Then we have a real deal tournament. You wind up winning the thing, and then you drop it to Dusty, of all people. Now I say of all people because I want to add the context here. That at the end of July, this same year, and remember now, this is happening on September 9th, but in late July, Dusty would beat Ric Flair to become the world champion in Greensboro. And now, of course, 2 weeks later, he dropped it back to Rick. But here in early September, he's now the TV champion. Man, he's got a program of all programs with the Horsemen here. What do you remember about dropping your most coveted belt? You've told me before off air and maybe even on the show here that your world title was that red NWA television title, and you dropped essentially your world title here to Dusty, a guy you grew up idolizing. This had to be quite the moment.
Live by the sword, die by the sword, right?
Yeah.
That's the moral of the story. Like I've said before, when you have stars that are mega stars and you go out and you have a competitive match where both guys are in the fight the entire time, you really have no losers at the end of it. I tried to pull something shady, blew up on me, cost me the title. But there's story there that will lead you to another match. A lot more drama than if he would have just beat me up and beat me 1, 2, 3, then what do you have left? I came out of that match with more gripes and more bitches and more promo material than I had going in.
Yeah.
And that's all I ever needed, Conrad. I just need a chance. There's the real truth, and then there's a heel's truth. I just had to give you my truth, which was all bullshit. But to me, it made perfect sense. And if I say it enough, it'll start to have a little meaning for the average Joe. Well, he does have a point. That's all you need to get back in.
Talk to me about your experience that day. Dusty's the booker, but he's also your opponent. Does Dusty come to you and tell you that you're going to be helping him a little bit that night, or does that come from someone else? When do you find out, and who tells you what I'm driving at, I guess?
Baby Earl came over with the finish, and that's the only conversation that caused in those days, locker rooms were on different sides of the building. You didn't have any conversation prior to shows. It was just all the info that you needed. And by that time, I'd wrestled Dusty so many times. I was tuned in 100% to what his offense was, what he did, what story we're going to tell. All I needed was just the final piece, and that came from Earl. And Earl was a top grade professional, great referee, brought the word over, and we were good to go.
September 11th, you're back on the road, Norfolk Scope. You'll be working with the Warlord here. That's a name we haven't talked a lot about. Any good Warlord memories you can share with us?
I'm sure I forgot that match by design. That could not have went well for me. I don't think. He was the biggest one of them all, of all those big guys. I think he was bigger than the Road Warriors just because of his height. The guy was like 6'7" or something, 340 pounds, 350 pounds. I don't know why I would have been wrestling him other than it was just a random booking. But from a storyline standpoint, I don't know how I got there.
I wanted to ask you about this little footnote. It's not exactly something you would have been involved in, but I know you've probably heard about it. As it's been reported, September here of 86 is when Jim Crockett Promotions would purchase the Central States territory. And we know a year later is when we have the whole Bill Watts discussion. But I've heard different people say different things about Central States, that really they weren't buying anything. That was positioned as a way to just save face, to say, hey, our business is really sucking hind teat, and you guys can have our territory. Other folks say, oh no, Crockett started to spend too much. He wasn't minding the pennies. He had big attendance at some of these concepts like the Great American Bash Tour, but he overspent. And this was another example of that. But people don't talk about this quote unquote purchase the same way they talk about the Watts territory. As someone who was there on the road for Jim Crockett Promotions, what were you guys led to believe was the case with the whole Central States purchase, if you will?
I think this was the selling point. We had acquired a pretty good size talent roster. The fact is that territory was dead and had been dead for quite some time, Central States. But we had guys that weren't getting booked. And you got to remember this day and time, if you didn't work, you didn't get paid.
Right.
Period. We had a lot of extra talent, had some guys that were middle of the card down to underneath talent that weren't getting booked. I think they had the opportunity that was pitched to them like, hey, you guys were going to send a crew out there and get this place back up and running, with the idea that you could bring the top talent from Crockett's A and B team out there to help them if they need it. But it was going to be able to give those guys a chance to work every day and make a living. The fact is, though, that there wasn't much going on. The territory had been dead and it just didn't work. They were starting from ground zero, running that as like a regular territory out there. And with talent that were not necessarily, no disrespect, A-list performers. They might have had a couple of guys. I want to say that Steve Williams and Big Bubba went out there for a short time. And it was just too far gone to do anything with, was my understanding.
I want to mention that this is Bob Geigel's territory, and he's going to be a strong supporter of Harley Race who was also part owner. Eventually, they would become known as the Heart of America Sports Attraction. But still, as the story goes, he sells this promotion to Jim Crockett Jr. in September of 86, but he repurchases it, whatever that means, in February of 87, and then closes it in 88. But this feels like a favor from Mr. Crockett to the Geigel family, because Geigel had been a member of the NWA board and even the president for several years. You know, I guess he joined in 63 and then was on the board from 78 on. But he is, as Dusty would call him, a power broker, even if his business wasn't necessarily a booming. It's probably a good thing politically and strategically for Crockett to rub up against Geigel if he wants a vote of confidence from what's left of the NWA, right?
Well, if you want to keep St. Louis and Kansas City on a sometime roster,
yeah,
it would have been a decent idea. And that was the idea. I think you could, send the A team in there at any point, sell either one of those cities, out. But other than that, I don't know what your big towns were. And in those days, the NWA members did honor each other's territory. You didn't go and run in a guy's territory if you were an outsider. It really was like a commission. And, there was territories that were divided up that fell under the NWA banner. And you just, in those days, you were respectful of those boundaries.
Do you remember having any conversations or interactions with Bob Geigel?
Shook his hand, Mr. Geigel. Arn Anderson, how are you, sir? Oh, yes. Hello, Arn. Well, that was it.
Gotcha. You're going to be doing a TV taping in WTBS, of course, Atlanta. You'll be in singles action against Jack Jackson. What a name that is. That doesn't sound made up at all. On September 14th. That night, you're in Cleveland, Ohio, working with Dick Murdoch. We've talked a little bit about Dick. Why don't you think he was a bigger hit in this run? I mean, a really talented guy. I guess some people would argue that at times he didn't take the business as seriously as he could or should. But he is, in this era, perceived as being one of the boys and a really talented performer. And it felt like, we're letting him brush up against Dusty and Magnum, but it doesn't really catch fire. Do you think that was a timing thing, or was he just not as into it as maybe he could have been?
Well, I think it might have been perceived that Dick was old.
I got you.
It was a young man's business at that time. And you had the rock and roll, you had the Magnum, you had the Road Warriors, you had these bodies, these good looking guys, good looking athletes. And, Dick kind of looked like just an older guy that was at the end of his career. And really he was, but he could still perform and he could still entertain. And I think, I just don't think he came in. I think he was maybe 10 years too early.
It's just interesting. He's a year younger than Dusty. He's several years younger than Ole, maybe 5 years. But I hear you. It just feels weird. Age is such a weird thing. As we're recording this, I recently watched Survivor Series 1996, and Jake Roberts came back as a bit of a surprise that night. And one of my friends that we were watching the show with commented, "Oh, wow, Jake looks old there." And I thought, well, he couldn't have been. And I looked it up. He's 41 years old, which is younger than Bobby Lashley is right now. Age is a funny thing with wrestling. Do you have a rule of thumb or a strong opinion about what's too old, what's not old enough? Age is just a number. Where do you fall on that in professional wrestling?
Cosmetics are important. They really are. And as it is said on virtually every site, every day, I looked 50 my entire career, whether I was 25 or 63. Using myself as an example, I think if you can perform at a high level, even though you appear to be older, but your performance is still there, you can wipe away a lot of the critics. Matter of fact, a lot of people I think would have the idea that, damn, what's a guy? How the hell is he able to pull that off? How old is that guy? And you find out he's not as old as you thought he was. It's more about performance than chronological age, but I know it's a young man's business, and we need to keep filtering in on a regular basis. Talent flow needs to be the young guys so they can grow up in the business and establish themselves in front of the camera to where the audience can watch them grow up. I think I'm a big, proponent of that. I use the Hardys as an example. We grew up on the Hardys, my generation. Those kids showed up as just two tackling dummies and had incredible careers and are still having incredible careers. That would be another example. Chronological age is not as important, I think, as performance is the moral of the story, I believe.
Let's keep that conversation going. I'm sure it'll come up again. At least for now, let's talk about September 18th. We're in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You're going to be taking on the Baron. And you actually get the win by DQ because Baron Von Raschke refused to break the claw after you reached the ropes. This sticks out like a sore thumb because the Baron is a part of Paul Jones' army. He's a heel, and so are you. But I guess this is close enough to the old AWA territory and his old stomping grounds that maybe this booking makes sense. What do you remember about this?
Well, I just saw Baron a couple of weeks ago when we're in Minneapolis. He looked exactly the same, which was awesome. That's the only explanation possible. He was well known from the AWA days. They wanted to get him a booking because it makes no sense from a heel babyface standpoint. But hey, I love working with Baron. There's no issue there. And what a nice man.
I want to mention the Met Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota is where you are the next night, this time against Jimmy Valiant. So you're working on back-to-back nights, the Baron and then Boogie Woogie. Talk me through that.
Well, number one, it was probably the easiest match I was ever involved with. Boogie was pure entertainment. I'm sure that there was a point in there that we did the piss spot, and you know what the piss spot is.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was probably one night that I probably wouldn't even needed to have taken a shower, but you take one anyway. Boogie was a light as a feather, purely entertainer, and would have been a night off.
Oh man, September 20th. It's not a night off. It's going to be Arn and Ole taking on Ricky and Robert in the Greensboro Coliseum. More than 8,000 fans on hand. On the 21st, you're back doing TV. This time, of course, it's back at TBS. On the 21st, there's a matinee show. That same day that you're taping TV in Atlanta, you're doing a show in Asheville, North Carolina, and you're in the main event with Ole taking on Ricky and Robert. That night, though, it's a big show at the Coliseum in Charlotte. And once again, you're going on last. It's Ricky and Robert versus the Andersons. Listen, it's nice to be liked, right? And well thought of and appreciated and respected. But buddy, how many of these 3-show days do you really want to do? At some point, you've got to start to get a little burnout. How do you cope with that when you're making 3 towns in a single day?
Pretty easy to figure out. You go home, ask the missus how much the house payment is. She'll tell you. How much are the car payments? She'll tell you. I need to work 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Be honest with you. And if there was a way to have done it, I would have gladly done it. Got to remember, it's the first time in my life making money. and putting roots down and buying a home and furnishing a home and doing all those things and, working on getting a second car and all that stuff and all the things that you need. Cause wasn't that long ago when I arrived there with virtually nothing.
Right.
And it was never lost on me that stuff don't get paid for by itself. Pay your bills first, whatever you got left over, put some in savings and move on to the next town. And it was, again, you got to remember when you're 27, 28, whatever I was at that time, brother, this is all I ever wanted to do my entire life. Now I'm going to a different town every single day, wrestling Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors and the Rock and Roll and Jimmy, Jimmy Garvin, Ronnie Garvin, whoever it may be. Man, I was having the time of my life. It was never a day that I went, damn, I don't want to go to work today, because it wasn't work.
Let's talk about the money for a minute here. We talked about when you first joined Jim Crockett Promotions that it's never really discussed. And you even, told us about the first time you got paid down in Pensacola. But now business is hot. And I'm curious, since it has been a fruitful year, you're able to get that wife, that Nissan, and you're able to get that first house for $74,900 and what have you. Is there a rhyme or reason that you start to understand about the pay scale, or is it strictly a surprise every single time?
Yeah. And I didn't know what anybody else was making because it was none of my business. And that's something I've never asked. But during that particular time, Jimmy was high on us. He was high on the Horsemen. He knew our value, and our money was right. It was good. It was going up at a rapid pace. And on those towns where you had 7, 8, 9,000 people and you were on last, you got paid. And I had no complaints at that point. Again, it was more money than I ever dreamed possible. I was thrilled to death.
Now, you said a minute ago, you never talked about the money with anybody else. And we've heard a lot of people say that in wrestling. You don't talk about money. You don't ask what everybody else is getting paid. You don't compare notes. And I know you didn't actively participate in that, but I'm sure it had to casually come up if you were excited, if you were disappointed, and maybe you wouldn't say, "Hey, Tully, what did you get?" But there had to be some sort of conversation about, "Hey man, how about those Columbia payoffs?" Right?
Never.
So you never express any frustration or, indifference. I mean, is that really what it is? It's just a straight no. And if so, who instilled that in you to that degree?
I was just always of the opinion, again, this is something I've kept in my mind throughout my going on 40 years. If I re-signed a contract with, let's just say WCW, and it was not what I knew everybody else in the room was making, here's the thought that I put in my head. Okay, what are you worth on the open market to, let's just say, go sell cars? What do you think you'll make? Let's just say you're a real idiot and you go back and you start cutting meat in the grocery store. What do you figure that pays? And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, every day of my life, even when I was getting screwed, that I was getting paid way more than I was worth in any other job, in any other occupation, anywhere in the world. You just don't make what I was making. And that's what I kept in the back of my head. I never asked what anybody made until much later, until we got into the thing where Tully and I were, figuring out where we're going to leave. Then this discussion of money came up, which led to us leaving. But on a regular day-to-day, week-to-week basis, man, I was thrilled to death.
Did you ever, I know you've told us before about sort of the end when you go have a heart-to-heart with the Crockett's about income, and ultimately you and Tully decide, hey, we're going to make the jump when it doesn't happen. But in this era, in 86, when things are going well, is there ever, because I assume, based on what I've seen in Jim Cornette's book, you get like a little statement, a stub, if you will, and it lists the towns and it lists the amounts. Do you ever try to go revisit that or ask questions of the promoter? Do you ever, and if you would you talk about that with David or Jimmy or someone else?
Nobody. I never discussed money. It was the wrong thing to do because it threw up a red flag with your employer. You know, if this guy's just worrying about that he didn't make enough for Orangeburg, but I paid him $1,500 for Charlotte and he didn't have to drive anywhere. You know, all those things came into play. It was like, you might not get what you thought you should get on a, let's just say a $15,000 house, and you were a single main event and all that. Let's just say you didn't get what you thought you might, but you turned around, you know, on the next big show and they bumped up your money, maybe more than what it should have been. You know, Jimmy was smart. He would make sure his top guys at that time were making money.
So that was sort of your internal dialogue. If you did open up a stub and you were a little disappointed, have a little patience. Let's see what next week looks like. And it usually came out in the wash, you're saying.
Yep, 100%. And at the end of the year, you went, are you kidding me? I made this much money. God almighty, that's more money than I made in 1 year. That's more money than I made my entire rest of my existence on earth.
Were you, in this era, it was always paycheck stubs, or were there certain promoters, local promoters, who paid in cash?
Well, when you work for a territory, there was always a check because they were a business. They had to have their W-2s and whatever that was in place and all that for the tax gimmick. You never got paid. Once I was working from Bill Watts to Continental to Jimmy Crockett or whatever, it was always paycheck. Came in the mail.
Oh, wow. So they mailed it to your house. You didn't get it at the towns.
Now in Crockett, you could pick it up at the office.
Okay.
You know, when it was everybody else, WCW or WWF, it was in the mail.
So when you were picking it up at the office, was that something where, like, and just help me understand, in real life, guys swing by and pick up their check on a Friday. You guys are in some random town on a Friday. Is that more like a Tuesday, Wednesday proposition where guys knew, hey, checks are ready Monday at 5 or what have you?
Wednesday was interview day, and you picked up your check on. And why? Because you're at the office, you were doing promos all day. You pick up your check. Some guys would go deposit them. And as you know, knowing something about my family unit, I took mine home and turned it over to the boss.
I think a lot of guys did that. I remember as a kid, my mom would make the trip out there, pick it up, go take care of the deposit. Dad was just the workhorse. Mom's out there making sure it's where it needs to be.
I was on allowance.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys are.
And hey, you know what? I wouldn't have a thing if it wasn't for that.
We both know that to be true. Let's move on. Cincinnati Gardens, September 23rd. There's only 1,600 people here, but you're in a steel cage match with Dusty Rhodes for the TV title. Cincinnati, what do you think of that as a Crockett town?
Well, you know, we got talking and we just barreled by a moment in time that we would be remiss to just ignore. September the 20th, my birthday.
Okay.
What the hell?
My apologies. Arn, what'd you do on your birthday in 1986?
Probably worked 5 shots. Just thought I'd get it in there.
You were in Greensboro that day, working in front of 8,223 fans against Ricky and Robert. And then afterwards, you probably hit the old Dusty Trail home and gave Mrs. Anderson some sugar, and you guys had a good day.
Absolutely. That's probably exactly what happened.
Let's talk about September 25th. You're in Columbia at the Township Auditorium. It's Dusty and Arn Anderson again in singles action. On the 27th, there's a TV taping in Macon, Georgia at the Coliseum.
when you're in some of these Georgia towns, are you hearing from old? I mean, again, this is pre-cell phone, pre-pager, all that. But did you have like some friends that you grew up with that you would make sure they had tickets at the will call or what have you to come see you, or was that not really a thing?
Nah, nobody would, unless we would have ran Rome, which we never did. It was because there was no time to spend with them. If they would have driven to one of the Georgia towns, I would have got there an hour before the show, hugged their neck, been able to say hello, and that would have been it. Because as soon as the show or I was done, whichever occurred first, we were right back out the door heading somewhere else.
September 28th, we're back doing TV in Atlanta. It's going to be Tully, Ole, and Arn taking on Rocky Kernodle, Bill Tabb, and Charles Freeman. And then that night, the 28th, you guys run the Omni for the NWA US Tag Team Title Tournament. You're going to have the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals all that night. And ultimately, it winds up with the Russians becoming victorious. And I want to mention, this now makes it 2 sets of tag titles. I guess technically 3. The national tag team titles are being phased out, but now we've got the U.S. tag team title, the same year we had the nationals, and we've got the actual world tag team titles. The U.S. tag titles I actually liked from a design perspective. I thought the red strap was kind of cool and ahead of its time, and we had the red, white, and blue paint. But from your perspective, are we starting to get maybe too many belts here in Jim Crockett Promotions?
Yeah, I think so. You could have gotten by easily with world title, world television title, U.S. title, and world tag titles, and that's it.
I wanted to ask your opinion about the U.S. tag titles, because I like the aesthetics and I like that, this carried through in the WCW. I mean, it is sort of fun. It's not really a brand split, so to speak, but it does create opportunities for champion versus champion. But I guess the line of thinking is much like there's a U.S. title to the world title, or on the other channel, there's an intercontinental title to the world title. This is sort of the tag team equivalent. But when you start lumping in the television, the U.S., the national, the Mid-Atlantic, there's a lot of freaking belts here in Jim Crockett Promotions.
And it waters them all down, I think.
Yeah.
There can only be so many prizes, and everybody getting in line for the same prize makes this value go up, to me. If everybody wants to be world television champion, it's a big deal. Same with any other title.
Let's talk about San Antonio. You're going to be headed back there for the Freeman Coliseum. It's going to be Ricky and Robert versus Ole and Arn. That's on September 30th. And meanwhile, they're doing a TV taping that same day in Rock Hill. And that's going to be how we wrap up the month of September 1986. Of course, October is the month where, unbelievably, Magnum TA has his accident, and that really changes everything. Of course, as you and I are talking, Thanksgiving is in the rearview mirror, and that really was our Thanksgiving tradition, Starcade. And as the story goes, it was going to be Magnum TA versus Ric Flair for the world title. They call an audible, and we'll talk about the audible maybe next month or next week here on the program. But Magnum, do you think if the accident wouldn't have happened, would he have been in the main event against Flair? And would he have beaten Flair? Would he have become the NWA World Champion, in your opinion, at Starrcade 86?
Not sure. I think he still had some growing to do. And it may be only 6 months. But I think he was positioned properly. He was certainly qualified. I would have probably liked to have seen a 6-month build to him having his day.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com. Let me ask, in your opinion, when we're talking about the NWA, there's so much other stuff to consider. Even though it's the dying days, Flair is still a touring NWA world champion. He's really the last one. And if they would have gone with Magnum, hypothetically, that would have meant Magnum is now going to be making these towns all over the world. And that would have freed up Ric Flair to be home more. I'm not sure that Flair wanted to be home more. It would have been great for Jim Crockett's business if Flair was on every show and wasn't with some of these other promoters. But I'm not sure if the other promoters believed in Magnum the way Jimmy did. Would all of those have been factors that went into the decision? I mean, by and large, Jim Crockett Promotions is the NWA here in 1986. There are other promoters, sure. There are other territories, sure. But Jimmy had the power, and given his newfound purchase with Central States, he's probably got an even bigger ally in Geigel than normal. Do you think I don't know, it's just a lot to consider, not just in terms of the creative, right? But the actual business of it. It's hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that they would have ever went with Magnum at Starrcade 86, specifically when you consider, from a creative standpoint, if you will, Crockett has done really well with a heel champion, having the babyface chase. That's not really what Vince McMahon did, right? Vince McMahon was a babyface territory. Bruno was champion for what felt like 20 years. And then Hulk Hogan needed a heel factory. So it's just a different approach. But I think Crockett and his territory and his business, even when Dusty won the world title, it was for 2 weeks. And then we're back to the bad guys, because that seems to be box office, right? The chase. Where do you land on that? Do you have a preference personally about a babyface champion or a heel champion with the babyface chasing?
Well, if you use Magnum as the example, if he wouldn't have been ready by that Starrcade to be the champion. And if you're going to have a traveling champion, there's the question, okay, Ric Flair is not available for all shows with Jim Crockett Promotions. Does that make him more valuable or less valuable? I think it makes him more valuable, to see Rick and being, in Sumter, South Carolina, just because he's available. It doesn't make it a big deal that Ric Flair's in town. It should be marquee matches, marquee towns with marquee build. And I don't think Magnum would have been ready as far as drawing everywhere that he would have went, because he was just getting rolling. It seems like a long time, but not really. When you build top baby faces, it takes time, and they have to win the big one when it's time. But then he would have needed to have been champion for a year before you move it on for it to have meant anything. I don't know if he was ready for that or not.
It's fascinating to think about all the what ifs and the politics and the moving pieces, but that's why we do this show, man. And we hope you guys are digging what we're doing. You can get all these shows early and ad free over at adfreeshows.com. And of course, if you want to participate in the conversation, maybe you've got a question for Arn, you can ask it on Twitter at the Arn Show. And I want to mention too, Arn's sporting one of his cool shirts. They're all available over at boxofgimmicks.com. We got something for everybody merch wise over at boxofgimmicks.com. But man, this was fun. I love getting in the weeds with you. I love talking about the politics and the business of the wrestling business and the behind the scenes. The creative is what gets us all here, because most everyone, myself included, grew up watching this stuff and loving it. But then to actually get to hear from you how the sausage was made, it makes for a fun experience. So thanks for the time today, Arn. I'm looking forward to next week.
Well, you said it already earlier. The thing that makes this whole business go round and round is the story.
And we'll keep the story going next week right here on Arn.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money, it's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.